Hello, hello. Welcome back to Unapologetically Wild with me, Katie Sontag. I am so excited and also a little bit nervous. So I've had a beautiful lady, and I was just actually trying to look up her name because you would have thought I would have looked this up earlier. Ask me to share about my military experience. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I've avoided this for a little while. I haven't been sure that I'm ready to share about my experience in the military, like all the way through. And I don't even know if that's the brief that she wanted, but that's how I have interpreted it. And that's how I'm going to share it with you today. Lib. I don't actually have your full name, but I think it's Lib. I'm going to hazard a guess at Libby. If I'm wrong, I'm so sorry. You can correct me in the comments. And anyway, she's asked me to talk about, what did she say? I'll actually read it to you. Specific episodes that cover my army experience as a woman. Now, this is powerful shit. And honestly, you've had me thinking a lot about this. And I kind of want to put this in a 2-part series because I kind of want to talk about my experience as one. And then I also am going to be, through that, giving you my perspective of what it's like for me as a woman. I hope this serves not only you, but the veterans or women out there who have served or haven't, to be honest. If you just know someone who served, I hope this actually helps you, because there are going to be a lot of facets of my career that have different experiences, different points of view. And obviously now I want you to understand, I'm looking at it now from point of view of leaving and almost being into a year of transition out of full-time military. So there is even that part that I'd like to go into. So I'm going to make this, like I said, probably a couple of part series because I feel like there's a lot to cover. And I feel like there's a lot of stories that may come out of this episode, but then that I might want to tell in the next one or the one after. I don't actually know what this looks like, but I feel like there's a lot in here for women who, like I said, who have served, who know women who have served, who are looking to serve. If you know any people like that, this could be helpful. It also may not be. I'm going to give you maybe a few warnings just at the start of this episode. Not sure if I will go into any of my trauma, but if I do, please be warned that will happen. I'll try and tell you beforehand anyway. If I don't, great too. Because talking about my military experience, I feel, is going to bring up a lot of things, and that can be beautiful and also can be a lot. So anyone who served will probably understand if you sit back and talk about your career. I would actually love and encourage anyone to do this, because even today I just wrote a timeline of my career. I didn't go into depth because I felt like I get to tell it through the timeline. And even that was interesting because I had forgotten about lots of things, and there's probably still so many things I've forgotten about through my timeline, but I wanted to give you the crux of it and what I remember. And as I kind of talk through it, I'm sure I'll be able to give you more experience and more understanding and knowledge of what happened, hopefully. So for those of you who don't know, I joined the army in 2012. Now I want to talk about why I joined the army, because that's another really good thing to think about. So throughout my childhood, I had a family friend who, she was in the army. She'd been for over 40 years. She was a PT. And in the end, like, I don't know how long she'd been in when I got in. Probably most, like 30, probably close to 30 years, I guess. Maybe even more by that time. And so as I grew up having her as a family friend, I was always the sporty one. You know, I always loved, getting out, playing sport, and kind of got to a point where I didn't really know what I was going to do. I did year 12 over 2 years. So I did, so I could keep playing sport. And so my mum's friend had been talking about the army for ages. She wanted her daughters to join, and that didn't quite pan out. They, beautiful, beautiful girls, modeled and did different things, and, now are doing incredible things with their lives. But they didn't kind of, I think at some point maybe wanted to, but anyway, that's their story. So I was kind of the kid that was like, she would be like, you can play sport, you can do this, you can do that, you'll love it. And I was like, "Okay, cool." And then she was like, at first it was like 4 years. And I was like, "Oh my God, I don't want to commit to 4 years. Like, fuck, why? I don't even know what this thing is, right?" And, I don't know if I want to get in the mud and and roll around. I love camping. Camping is very different to being in the army. Camping in civvy world is very different. Depends how you camp, I guess. But there's very different experiences. I'll explain later. So anyway, decided that I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna join. This is gonna be amazing." I remember going into the interview, and the one thing I'll never forget being asked in a psych interview is, "Do you feel like screaming when you walk into a church?" And I was like, "No, are you meant to? Like, what are we doing here?" And obviously at the time, I mean, I have no idea what that question pertained to, and maybe someone listening can shed light, but I was just kind of like, "Am I meant to wanna scream when I walk into a church?" Like, that's how the interview went, and I remember I went in there. It's the only real I've had job interviews, but not like that, obviously. That's been the biggest job interview I've ever had. And so, it was very scary. I did not know if I'd even get anywhere or what I would do. I didn't even know what job I was going for. I mean, I had admin down. I think I had maybe, like, QE and stuff. I kinda just went for the basic jobs because I wasn't really sure, and I was only doing it for a year. So I signed up as a gap year. And those of you who've been in the army, you know what that is. It's 1 year service. From there, you then decide if you want to discharge or you stay longer. As we all know, I stayed longer. No secret there. But I remember when I first joined, and I remember getting there, you do the photo and you do the thing, you say goodbye to your family, you get on the bus, and there's a scary man on the bus. And anyway, all of a sudden it's time. You're into it, you're ready to go. And I remember we stopped off in Sydney because we were picking some people up in Sydney. So we were staying there the night, and I had gone into my room and they were like, make sure you don't fall asleep." What do you think this gal does? Straight away, falls asleep, has a nap, misses the start of dinner. And I think I got the phone rang or something, and then I was like, "Oh my God," I answered, and I was in so much trouble. And they're like, obviously getting mad at me. And I remember because my mum's best friend had already prepped me that I'll be yelled at and probably get in trouble for a lot of things. And so I kind of thought I was prepared. And to be honest, I was a lot more prepared than most people, because when I got there, it didn't seem to affect me as much as some of the girls. I remember chatting to them and they were like, "This is so crazy. Like, what are we doing?" And I was like, I also feel that way. And though I feel like I knew it was coming. So it's kind of like I'd been prepared and I had some understanding of how it would work. I also, of course, being a massive people pleaser, was like, I just want to do it right. And I remember just being there the first few days. It was such a blur. It was like being yelled at all the time, to the point you almost kind of were like, you start to get used to it in a way. And I don't think you could ever say that you are like comfortable with it, but you're just like, this is normal now. Like, I've been yelled at that many times. And so I remember you're running around, you're trying to do everything, and at first you're not very good at it. Like, morning routine, they're like 15 minutes or whatever, and you're trying to fucking flail around, make your bed with your partner, put your clothes on, brush your hair. And at that point, I had actually shaved my head not long before. So I had like this weird bowl like cut because my hair was growing back. So I had to sort of like, it was like short. It wasn't super short. I could still kind of put a tiny little ponytail, and I had to literally buy gel because I bought him to bobby pins, and I couldn't obviously do that. And so I bought fuck tons of gel, and I would just gel the shit out of it. It was actually quite hilarious. But I was so worried they were going to tell me I had to shave it again. And I was like, for fuck's sake. But they didn't, thank goodness. And so I just had to like literally become best friends with the hair gel. I think I bought so much of the stuff when I went up for the first time to, when they take you up to, God, what do they call it? The canteen or whatever it's called. And you go get some supplies, and they take the boys to get their hair cut and all the things. And you're standing there freaking out, being like, what have I done with my life? It honestly is the most wild ride. And I think the weird thing is I remember when I first got my phone, and I think the best thing that I found was that my parents, obviously talking to my mum's friend, they were like, I was like, "I think I wanna come home, like, I'm done." I had a moment, right? Because you have heaps of moments when you're at Kapuka. I feel like if you don't have them, I mean, you're either very prepared and you aren't fazed by people yelling at you, or I don't really know, to be honest, because I had a lot of them. And I remember just being like, they were like, "Oh, no, 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 you're gonna stay there, you'll be fine." And thank goodness, because to be honest, sometimes in life you just need someone externally to say to you, "You've got this, you'll be okay." And I see that so often, how when you're supported, that works. Because a lot of people that I was with, their family were like, "Just come home, it'll be okay, like, don't worry about it." And they would go home, right? Because it's like the permission to not hold on to your dreams. I find this is so interesting. This is coming through for me right now, just for a conversation I just had. Of course, thank you, universe, thanks, spirit guides. And so I'm not gonna tell you about the conversation, but that'll steer me off track. See, this is what I mean. This is gonna go forever because I'm gonna get so excited and things in my life are gonna interrupt and be amazing. Anyway, I found it actually really easy physically because now, context, I had been training for 4 hours a day to the point where my mum took my keys off me. I was so neurotic about being fit enough for Kapuka. So I ended up putting on 5 kilos while I was at Kapuka. Easy, like, without even, like, blinking an eyelid. I was so fit when I came in, it was ridiculous. And because how it's set out, I guess now that I know from a training perspective, you can't if you're that fit before you come in, like, if you're doing that much training, you absolutely can put on weight. And that's why there's such a fluctuation where people who aren't as fit or don't do as much training might get fitter, and then you have the opposite of super fit people they probably will, they can maintain maybe, and then also can lose a lot of fitness because of the fact that because there's so many different stimulus, like there's obviously, you've got to learn how to shoot. And that was something I struggled with, which I found really interesting because I was strong, but I got scared, right? So the psychological part of it was that someone yelled at me on the range. Because when I first took my first couple of shoots, I was great and fine. It was all good. And then someone went at me at the range and I freaked out, right? And I was like, oh my God. Anyway, then I wasn't as great. So I got to the point where I actually had to retest again. And I felt like such a failure. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get back squatted. Now, that is actually a real fear. And it's actually very scary. And I remember being like, I have to pass this shoot. Like, I don't know what to do. I have to pass. Like, I should be able to shoot a gun. I'm strong. I can hold it. I don't have any troubles with that. I shot really well when I first took my first few shoots. And then after that time, I'd try and get with someone who was really calm because I found that obviously I shot way better when I was with someone who was calm. And so I remember doing my last day and I remember we had 3 shoots for our retest. And there's, us girls. There's no boys, of course, that have to do reshoots. I don't know how that works, but it's so interesting. And I always, like, now I think back to it, I'm like, it's definitely how you handle it under pressure. And it was by coincidence there was no boys, but they were all women when I went. And we were all, obviously quite scared. And so I remember my platoon commander at the time, he was like a sniper, very, fit. And he was like, I'm going to take you. And I'm like, great. And he was very calm, very but I felt the pressure of the fact that if I didn't pass, he had to do paperwork or I had to be back squatted. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, oh, anyway, totally botched that shoot. Actually, I wasn't that bad. I was only I think a couple of shots off. And then I had to do another shoot and I ended up with on my last shoot, I ended up with this guy who was one of the instructors that are posted to helping people with shooting. I forget what it's called. Oh my God. I've done so much army stuff. But anyway, I was with one of them and he was amazing. Super calm, super obviously relaxed because he understands that shooting, let's be real. If we're going out in a war zone, you would not want you'd have to train me to be okay with being yelled at. And now it would be a totally different story. I swear, sometimes in shoots, people are talking and going and yelling and doing stuff and you just shoot the weapon, right? But obviously as a brand new recruit learning a skill, you are obviously freaked out and everything is heightened. Your senses and everything are heightened. You're in stress. You're adding stress to yourself because if you're a high performer, you're someone who just wants to get it right. And if you don't, you just think, all these thoughts and everything, right? Happening in your head. And so I found that this guy being super calm, obviously just being like, "Just hold a weapon, you're good, all's okay." I was so lucky because I hit bang on the pass mark, and I was like, "Oh my God." I was like, "This is insane." I then though, because of that, obviously when I went through shoots later, I passed, but a couple of times when I was early on in my career, I had to retest because I was so stressed, and a lot of people were like, "Just calm down and breathe." Like, it's actually so interesting how when you first train a skill, and I find this intriguing now I think about it, but, like, when you first train a skill, if it's in a heightened way and you don't have the skill, like, learnt, you then obviously take that into every time you pick up a weapon, it's associated to that skill, right? Because that's how you've learnt it. And so now I look back and be like, wow, I mean, I would never want to take someone on the range ever and yell at them if they don't know how to shoot a weapon or hold it or they're not competent with it. I was also never want to yell at them. I don't on a range. I feel like that's a very scary scenario. So I actually really feel for the instructors who deal with that every day and who are recruit instructors because that would be quite a stressful time, especially with a weapon. Like, you know that can kill you. And so I found that really stressful. PT, amazing. Loved it. Loved my PDIs. Like, they were amazing. They were so funny. They did a skit of us at the end. It was hilarious. One of them was us and one of them was a PDI. We were like shaking and I didn't really understand what that meant until I became a PDI and watched recruits at Kapuka literally looking at us shaking. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. And like, of course, you're in a brand new environment. People are yelling at you. You know, you try to do your best. You try to like be like, I really want to do well here. So interesting when you have that opposite perspective. But anyway, Kapuka was fun. I really enjoyed it. I had a really great lot of platoon commanders, commander, and then I had really good corporals at the time. And yeah, I didn't even know at that time, but I remember they were going through a lot. And I think of their recruit instructors now, and I think that is one of the hardest jobs. And I actually take my hat off to them. And I also think there's got to be a better way to look after them, but that's a whole nother conversation. Anyway, moving on. So then I go to IETs. I found being a Kapuka fun. I didn't have any real problems as a female. Trying to think back. Yeah, I didn't really feel like it was ever really a problem. I felt like it was tough. And I don't think they were any different towards either sex. I can't remember anything at the time. I found that quite even with the group that I had. I feel like I was very lucky in that. I feel like our cis platoon was very different just in when you spoke to them. And, you know, they also had a female instructor. We didn't. And I found that interesting. Not a bad thing, not a good thing. I don't really know if there was anything in that, but she was scary. Fair enough, hey. I actually think back and I'm like, you would have to be, because that environment really needs that. Especially when I was there as a PDI, you need a great balance of being able to hold yourself in leading and instructing and being someone who's quite strong and also being soft enough for people to feel safe to talk to you. It's a really interesting leadership balance that I find so intriguing. Anyway, found that fine, moved to IETs. IETs, I went to holding for, I think, not very long, and then straight to IETs. IETs was fine. I don't really remember much about IETs, if I'm honest. I feel like it was a good experience. Then I posted to Toowoomba. So that was really fun. This was actually a really great posting for me, and this is how I ended up staying in the army for longer. I had this incredible corporal at the time, Charmaine, I won't say her last name, just in case she doesn't want me to. I don't know why. She was amazing. I found she taught me so much about leadership, and I think it's so interesting having female leaders, and you can, you know, you either learn things from leaders or you don't, right? Like, and I feel like it doesn't matter if they're good or bad. It depends what works for you. And what I loved about her was her ability to literally be so strong and hold the line, right? Because I'm a brand new digger. I don't really know what's going on. And I also, you know, she doesn't know me, and I need structure, especially because I really responded to structure. I've come from a like sports background, a swimmer, all these things. So to have structure was really important. And I love that she held that. But she had that ability to switch into nurturing and looking after someone. And this is honestly, I feel like she was one of my biggest mentors because it was so incredible to have a moment. And I'm going to tell you a story. I remember I went home on leave and while I was home, a family friend had died. And I was really upset by it. He was a beautiful person. I'd known him forever. He was almost like another grandpa to me. Like it was just one of those moments, and he had died from Parkinson's. So we knew that he had been unwell. It was a sudden thing, but it wasn't a sudden thing, if that makes any sense. And I remember I came back and I was fucking up everything. Like honestly, all small things, but like just fucking things up that I would be so good at, especially in admin. I was very on top of my work because I'm a perfectionist and I prided myself on it. And I remember I came back and she was like, brought me into a room and was like, we need to have a conversation, and had a record of conversation on the desk, but also just said to me, but before we start, I need to ask, are you okay? Is there anything going on? And see, this is a beautiful thing about leadership. And I will never forget her for this. Like there was so many other things she did that were amazing, but I think this was a pinnacle moment and it's making me emotional. But in the fact that first she checked in if I was okay. And then if there wasn't something going on, it was a record of conversation. And I think this is lost in army. And I also think this is a skill that she was so good at, caring about you first as a person. And I think then being like, look, there are rules and there is a way you have to do things. We've talked about it and we need to have a proper conversation. Because here's the other thing. There are so many people, and this is just my personal experience, there are so many people that do things, and there's a point, right, where you need to write things down and be like, we've had the conversation. She talked to me about it, asked me if I was okay. I didn't really tell her. And when I was like broke down and was like, actually, while I was home, and she's like, you can call us and we can extend your leave. Like if you needed more leave or more time, you could have put your flight back. You could have stayed for the funeral. And I remember just being like, wow, like they were the leaders that I had when I was in my gap year. They were like, do you want to go do stuff? I remember I remember once I slept in and I ran down and I'd missed PT, and my, roommates were like, oh my God, we thought you were at PT. They hadn't woken me up, which is not their job. My job is to get up to my alarm. And I ran down and I just got dressed straight away, ran into my sergeant and was like, I am so sorry, I missed PT. And then my woe was like, oh, I thought you were there. And I was like, no, I slept in. I'm so sorry. Please, like, whatever you need to do. And so they did. Oh my gosh. They gave me extra duties. And so I sat in there and I sorted out the passports and, I was infringed, which is, to me, it makes sense. Like, I feel like I fucked up. I admitted to my fuck up and then I got infringed. I did an extra task and I really was very lucky because my woe at the time was on duty that night. So it kind of worked out that he could supervise me, which really was just kind of like a chat about life while I was sorting passports, while I was doing 4 hours of extra duties. And so I think the beautiful thing is there were rules and structure. If I didn't obey them and I didn't do it right, I expected the punishment, whatever that meant. But there was always a check-in to make sure I was okay. Even for that moment, like, are you okay? Why did you sleep in? Like, and I was like, I just generally was super tired because nothing I could have done or not done. And I was very honest and open. And I feel like that was a really beautiful environment to be into. And I feel like when the chain of command are all very aligned in how they deal with things, it actually is very amazing because my experience at that unit was impeccable. It was the most amazing thing. And it was why I signed on to do like 4 years, because I was like, I absolutely want to stay. I love this. I've got the best leaders ever, especially being a brand new digger and being exposed to leadership for the first time in a way that it's not like when you're at school and you've got a teacher, it's a very different way, or you being a leader of your cohort. But like having a beautiful structure was how I first saw the army and was brought into the army and loved it. Little did I know that as we went through my career, that would change. And so I think the beautiful part about that is that I then asked for a posting because I wanted to be closer to my family, because at the time there were some things going on, and I was really lucky to be granted one. And I was told, though, that, different places will give you different experiences and you'll learn different things. And I found that really interesting being a woman throughout my career, and I think it was probably one of the best things to learn and to have for my first posting was to experience a really great leadership team. And the fact that the women were strong, because I remember how strong she was, even in, being able to voice her opinion respectfully. And like, that was a really big lesson to watch that happen with any rank, with any person. And I think that was, people can say what they like about that, but I found her very inspiring as a woman, and I wanted to be a leader like her. And I think sometimes when you go through your career and you meet incredible leaders, that is such a beautiful thing to hold on to. And I'm really grateful for that first posting. And as a woman, I felt that I was treated really well there. And so I really loved it. I loved it. I remember getting posted then to Sydney to an APAC. Now, this was a bit of a different sort of posting because you're kind of part of a cohort where you're all doing data entry and all these other things. This was a very different dynamic. I found it very different depending on the leads I had at the time, and that kind of changed and shifted. And it was where I first then got trained to be in pay trades. So I was in pay and admin. And that was good, but we never got extra pay to be in it, to have two trades. And that was something we fought too. And it was so interesting watching that dynamic of how that looked and what that was meant to be. And I found that that was just a great opportunity for me then to go on a trip to Malaysia. And I got to be attached to a infantry unit, which I had never really had any experience with. This was where I found the first time that I was more a piece of meat than I was a human. Not by everyone, just because I went to Malaysia and they were out in the scrub, out in the, oh my God, jungle. And that was really interesting because when they'd come back and they'd smell you, they were like, oh my God, you smell so good. And it would be like they were like an animal coming to something that had a shower. It was wild. And I was for the first time actually quite uncomfortable sometimes. And I had to sort of work out what that meant, how I could look after myself. I was lucky I had a female mentor there as well who looked after me. But it was just such an interesting dynamic where for the first time I had actually sort of had times where I was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. And I had some great men there too. But it was just this really interesting piece where you were no longer sort of in not a safe space, but there was more to consider and there was more to be wary of. And you had to pick your people. And you had to kind of know where that was going to go and what that was going to be and who was going to keep you safe. And so I find that really interesting because that sort of sets up a bit of a tone of how that went. When I was in APAC, I had experiences of trauma. And so I think kind of moving from 7 Sig, that wasn't in the army experience, but it was through army events that had things happen to me. And so feeling safe around men was not a thing. And I think also that comes from a lot of other trauma through my life, but I felt like it really became a thing, and it became something that I was hyper aware of as I sort of moved through my career from that point. I'm going to leave it at that, because I feel like that's probably a good point. We've only really got to 2015, so we've gone 4 years into the Defence Force. But it's a different conversation, I think, and I think it warrants its own time. But I thank you so much for listening. I hope you got something out of it. There will be another progression. We'll start talking about what happened, post Malaysia, post into my next part of my career. I hope you've got something out of this, and I hope that there is something that you can take from it, that you're going to be inspired, maybe as a leader, or, it helps you heal in some way if you're a veteran. And if you're someone navigating your career right now, I hope there's some nugget in here that you needed to hear that's actually going to serve you moving forward. And I will tackle more of this situation of being a woman in defense in the next one, because I feel like it's going to be very potent as I sort of move through the next few years. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a magical day. Please subscribe to my channel. I would love to. I'm trying to get 100 subscribers on YouTube, so I'd love your support. And I would love if you liked it, comment anything that comes up for you. And I would love if you want to DM me. If you would ever like to work with me, make sure you go check out my website, www.katiesontag.com. And if you ever need any support or help, please reach out. I would love to chat to you further. And I hope you have the most magical, magical day.